Hello? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Can everybody in the back hear me? All right, hi guys. I guess we're about to get started. I know a lot of people are missing right now because there's a 170 midterm. But for all the guys who came, thank you for coming out. So today's topic is going to be self-joins and Heroku. First off, we're going to start with some basic logistics. How many of you guys have checked in with your TA earlier this week, by any chance? Ooh, perfect. I mean, it's expected. The thing is, for all your check-ins, you don't have to meet them in person. You could just email your TAs. So just make sure you email your TAs, or you can meet in person if you want to. But just make sure you get an email at least to them by the end of this week. And yeah, that counts as your guys' check-in. Just a quick poll, actually. Just on the count of three, like everybody just put your fist out. And on the count of three, can you just give me a 1 if you guys started your project, or a 2 if you guys haven't? All right, 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's a good mix. A lot of 1s, but it's pretty solid. I'm actually pretty impressed. And I mean, you guys have quite a bit of time to do it, so no need to worry yet. Okay, so starting off, we're gonna talk about joins. So what we learned before in this class on our models is a has one and belongs to. Should I try to make this bigger, or is it fine? Okay, so what we learned before is a model could either has a has one relationship, belongs to relationship, and has many relationships. And then basically, what we did with that is we relied on standard inferences, right? Like, let's say like a user has 1 pet, right? We just say, user, well, in our user model, we just type has_1 and then say a pet, right? And then it's gonna make these assumptions that you do have a pets table, and on that pets table, you have a column user_ID, right? So what if we start modeling things that aren't standard? And today's example is a friendship. Friendships are pretty common, like just a connection between 2 users. You see them on a lot of sites, the biggest one's Facebook. And with the knowledge we learned in this class, there's no way we could do that so far. So we really want to learn this, and it's really important for like social media sites if you ever want to make one. So I'm going to go to the example of what happens when we do a has many in our quit model that we covered in the last 2 lectures. So if you remember in user.rb, we tell it has many quits, right? And the things it infers is that 1, we do have a quits table. 2, there's a user, that's a typo, it should just be user_ID on the quit. And that basically refers to the user that owns a quit, right? So if we want to do something different, AKA a friendship, right? We have a problem. And that problem is, what do you put on the friendship? Does it has like, it has 1 user, and it also has another user, right? And if we both, you just can't reference both of them in one has, or sorry, in one belongs to. So a friendship basically belongs to 2 users, right? And with the logic we know now, we basically just say, oh, belongs to user, but since there are 2 users, there's some ambiguity, and we wouldn't know how to resolve that. So first thing we want to do is we want to separate the references to the users. In this very specific example, like a friendship, we'll have 1 user be user A and another user be user B. Within our friendship model, so along with our friendship model, we have to create a table, right? Within our model itself, we'll say, hey, this belongs to a user_A and a user_B, so that in my piece of Ruby code, if I ever have a friendship and just call dot user underscore A, I should get one user. And if I were to call dot user underscore B, I should get another user. Right now, the problem is if we just do that, we'll make an inference that we do have a user underscore table, user underscore A's table and a user underscore B's table, which we don't have. And ideally, we don't want to make two separate tables because they're referencing the same set of users. So what we want to do is use a method or an option on the belongs to method. And just don't worry, you don't need to like copy this down or anything because I'll also show it in live coding on how we will use this in our Quitter app. So continuing on, we want to use something called a foreign key. So basically what a foreign key on a database table is saying this references something else, right? We've already been using a lot of foreign keys for like ownerships, for example, like a user and its pet, right? The user ID is a foreign key. It references something on the users table. So since a friendship mentions two users, we want to basically have our friendship hold two different IDs. One should be an AID and the other should be a BID. These are terrible names, so I'm just using it for an example. And there's a typo on the slide I realize right now that, I'll just get to it when it comes. But so let's say we have our friendship table. We have an AID column on it and a BID column on it. And we want AID to reference the ID of user A and B to reference the user of, let B underscore ID reference user B. So what we can do is type belongs to colon user underscore A. That's basically saying, oh, I'll define this relationship. It's pretty much, I define this method, user underscore A, then pass it a class attribute. And because user underscore A doesn't match a class name anymore, because we're using a special name, we want to tell Ruby what class it is. So I'm going to just pass in colon user. And if you remember, colon user basically says, turn this into a symbol. It's the exact same thing as a string. And Ruby will figure out to use the user.rb in your app/models file and get the user class from it. And the last argument you hand it is the foreign key. Foreign key, you just pass it another symbol and say, hey, this is the key on our friendship that tells me which users this is. So this foreign key, A underscore ID, basically says, whatever is under A underscore ID, that is the ID of the user I'm going to refer to for user underscore A. And now we could basically copy that logic over to user underscore B. So I could just write the lines belongs to user underscore B, tell it again, the class is a user, and the foreign key that's a typo up there, that should be a B underscore ID. And I'll fix that towards the end of class. And with that, it gives us the ability on this new friendship object that we could reference like one user at the end of the friendship and another user at the other end of the friendship. So now we have to think about it on the other end. What if we want a user to basically list all its friendships? In this case, it's kind of funny, but if you think about it as like a Twitter following, and we had a follow.rb, right? Then we have two columns on this table. It would be the follower's ID and the person being followed, right? So when we run our Ruby code and we look at a user and we say to get all the people it's following, we have to tell it which ID the user is itself. And that's where we use a foreign key again. So let's say let's go back to the friendship model, right? Sorry, let's go back to user model. So inside our user RB, we wanted to find that it has many friendships. And basically, it already assumes, yes, we do have a friendships table, right? We don't need to manually overwrite that with something. What we do need to tell it is whether, like, what key it is, what is referencing that user in our friendship table. So in our friendship table, we have two options. We have A_ID or B_ID. And for our case, let's just say we want this user to be the one that is referenced in A_ID. We could just say has many :friendships. So basically define a .friendships method for a user and say foreign key :A_ID. So that when we make a table query on the friendships, that we're going to, any row with the AID that's equal to the user's ID is what we're going to retrieve. All right, what are your questions so far, if any? All right. If you guys are just generally lost now, I'll do a lot of this in our live demo, and hopefully it'll be a lot more clear then. So the last thing we want to do, I want to just talk about is just explaining some more convenient things you could do with relationships. And let's say, so right now we have a user, right? And we defined a method that basically gets all its friendships, or basically every friendship it is a part of. But what if we want to do something better and like just makes another very convenient method where we don't want to just get the friendships, we want to get the actual users, like all the user information, like all those people's names, their emails, their ages, stuff like that. One thing we can do is basically define a friends method, right? And then we just go onto our friendships and just map the user _B from it. So that's basically saying, my friendships gives me an array of friendships, okay. And then we're just gonna call each of those .user _B on it. And then we'll call flatten on it just to make sure it's, this array is only one deep. And now I have a list of users, and that would be like all my friends, right? Now I have a list of all my friends. But we could also define it as a relationship, which is more of a common practice. It only takes one line of code instead of defining a whole function. And you just say has many : the name of what you want to call the relationships. So in this one, I think the intuitive name would just be your friends, right? I pass in an argument through. And what through does is say, hey, this is what array I want you to use. Like this, this association that I have already defined, use that array, and I'm going to pass in source, and source is basically saying call that method on it. So has many friends through friendships, source user B does the exact same thing as a function defined on top. And that's all going to be covered during the live coding section. And the last thing we're going to cover today is just actually posting your application online on Heroku. If you did the extra credit project one, you probably already done this. And if you haven't, I'm going to show you guys how. And it's pretty simple. Currently, like the reason why we use Heroku before and why a lot of people use Heroku is that one, it's very easy to use. And two, it's free. But I know in the near future, they actually plan on taking away the free tier and making it cost, like whatever the free tier is right now, they're going to make it like $7 a month. And I mean, it's still probably something useful that you might want to know in case you need a, you prototyped your app and you just want to host it on for a little bit and see like how much traction you could get at the beginning. So yeah. All right, I'm going to go to the live coding. So this is our app from before. And if you just want to start where I am, you could just go to our Rails Decal repository and just clone lecture 9. Is there any last minute questions before I start? All right. Actually, let me take out my notes for this. Okay. So first thing I want to address is a question that was asked towards the end of last lecture about how I've said like, oh, you shouldn't usually do an admin through a Boolean. And I started trying to do the non-Boolean way, but I was like, I'm going to save it for next lecture. So I'm actually going to do that now. So it's very dependent on how you foresee your management systems going. Like for our Rails Decal website, what we do is we create role objects. Oh no, sorry, we create semester objects, right? So we have references to each semester. We have position objects that have there's basically 4 positions. You're either an observer, a student, a TA, or an instructor. And the last thing is, wait, position is basically a join of an account, a role, and a semester. And the reason why we did that was to allow flexibility in between semesters. So there's different management privileges given to the instructor and the TA. But let's say like I was a TA last semester, right? Then I could switch in the application for this semester to be the instructor, which is what happened. But that means basically I have like complete administrative whatever powers over this current semester. But then like if I want to like check on people's just very people's grades for last semester, only have a limited scope. And this is like, that's one way to design an administrative system, but I'm going to show you one that is just a single step up from Boolean, but I think this should be the bare minimum. So first, I'm going to generate a migration. Let's see, change admin on users. It creates the migration for me. Define change. So basically, my first thing I want to do is I'm going to remove the column on the users table. And the column I want to remove is admin. So basically, if I run this migration, I'll look up the users table, find the admin column, and just take it out. Next, I'm going to say add column to the users table. And what I'm going to call that column is role. And the interesting thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it an integer column and set the default to 0. I'm going to rake db migrate. Hopefully that will just work perfectly fine. All right. I'm going to go to my user.rb model. And actually, I'm going to annotate quick to change what's here. So right now, I took out the admin Boolean, and I inserted a column called row, and it's an integer. So what I'm going to store in this, I'm going to basically map an integer to a role. And the reason why I'm doing this over your normal admin capabilities is the fact that, like, basically, if I want to continue adding roles, like let's say my organization now has like a position called like a leader, which is like less than an admin, but still has more powers than a regular user, or I add a volunteer that you know, he has just a little more power than the user, but less than one of our leaders, right? If I were to do the Boolean system, I'm adding like 3 more columns on top of admin over this, versus using an integer, I still only have a single column on it. And I could just basically continually add roles on top of it. Now, the crappy part about this is now throughout this whole application, I have to remember like, oh, what does 0 mean? What does 1 mean? What does 2 mean, right? Who does map to? An easy way to do this is defining an enum. And have you guys worked with enums before? I think it's pretty common in doing it in 61B, but basically it's just like you're declaring some constants that are mapped by integers. So what I want to do is I say there's an enum. I say which column the enum's on. So I know it's going to be on the roles, right? And I'm going to pass in an array. The first one I'm going to say is member. The second one, admin. And let's say I have a third position, moderator. Basically, with this enum logic right here, I've created 3 functions for my users. And it is 3 functions for each of these. But the most important thing you need to know is when I declare an enum, I'm going to map 0 to the first item, 1 to the second item, 2 to the third item, continuing on with that logic. And on the column in my database, if I get a 0, I know this user is a member. If I get a 1, I know this user is the admin, right? But interesting thing is, now if I pop open my console, I get user.first. Do you see what happened right there? It's really small. But role, even though it's an integer in our database, what the enum allows us to do is just map it to a string. So it's just a lot easier to work with. Instead of memorizing what 0 means, what 1 means, what 2 means, you already got like the string version, which makes human sense. And it provides us convenience methods. So if user.first is a member, right? So if we type in member and append a question mark to it, we're basically asked, hey, does the role column match the string member? And since it's true, it returns us true. But let's check if this guy is an admin. It's false. So this is at the base level, I would recommend this as your authorization system. Yeah.
If you have 2 enums with the overlapping strings, wouldn't that mess up? How to know which?
Oh, you define it. So so wait. So is your question like if I define 2 enums?
Yeah, if you have roles, you have something titles.
Oh. I actually don't know the answer to the question. So the question is basically if I had another enum, right? And it's called title or something. And then it also had something like member, right? And then let's say its role was an admin, but its title was member or some weird logic like that. And I called the dot member question mark, what it returned. I actually have no idea. But I mean, I could find out really quickly. Oh, yeah, you could do that, but add title to users title integer. Oh, crap. Let me take that out real quick. Oh, Oh, well, that tells me basically Rails is going to complain and says we have an enum conflict. How convenient. Rails is great. All right. So that's for the authorization stuff. I'm going to get to the main part about it. And what I want to do is basically create all the follow logic I was talking about. So I'm going to Rails generate model. And the model is going to be called follow. And we'll have a follower, aka the person that's following somebody. And it's stored in the database, the ID of that follower, and it's an integer. And I'm going to also store the person that's followed, integer. And I want to check this migration. And this creates the table I want. So I'm going to rake db migrate, annotate it. And this follow.rb is going to be in your app/models. So the first thing I talked about was pretend like our follow was our friendship. So now we have to define, like if we pull a follow from our database, right? We want to be able to access the person that is following someone and the person that is being followed. So I'm going to define that with a belongs to, since basically a follow belongs to a user. It belongs to the follower. I'm going to define its class name. I know it's going to be of type user. And the last thing I need to remember is the foreign key, aka use which of its columns to find the ID of the user. And the column I want to use is the follower ID. So I define a foreign key and pass it a follower ID. And I want to do the same for person being followed. Class name, tell it the user, and that the foreign key is the followed ID. Okay. Now, theoretically, if I hold up our console, we don't have any follows to begin with. All will return nothing. So I'm just gonna create a new follow, f equals follow.new. And I want to, let's say I want the first user to follow the second user, right? I could just say f.followed equals user.first. And because I defined that belongs to method, I'm gonna take that user, grab its ID, and shove it into my follower ID column. Okay. That's not my terminal, but this is. Well, I just set the person being followed to be user.first. So now I need to set the follower. So f.follower, because of my convenient relationship that I just defined, I could just use user.second. And now I could just say f.save. So if I inspect my follow.first, I could see that it correctly set the IDs of the follower being the follower ID being the second person, and the person being followed is person of ID 1. All right. Do we have any questions before I move on? Okay. Now I want to make it on the user's end. So let's say I want a user to get all the follows that it's related to, right? Right now, I don't have anything, so if the user that first dot follows, it's gonna give me a no method error because I haven't defined anything yet. So what I'm going to do is pop open my user.rb and give it another relationship. I'm going to say has many follows. But when I go to the follows table, I realize there's no user underscore ID. And I don't know if this user wants to be the follower or the person being followed. So I'm going to say your foreign key, aka your key on that table, is going to be the follower ID. So basically now I've said that if I get a user and call its dot follows, I'm going to get all the follow objects where the user is the follower. So if I pop open console again, if I do user dot first dot follows, it'll give me nothing because this person is not following anybody. He's being followed by user number 2. So if I do user dot second dot follows, I get all the follow object, or that single follow object. Now, let's say I want to access all the users. Just write another convenience method. So like in my Ruby code, I don't want to just make a query for this and then write a map every time. I want to make a convenience method so I could just easily do like @user dot followed users. So the last slide I was talking about is defining a has many relationship. I'm going to call them my followed users. I'm going to pass them a through key, which basically says, do it through this array. I'm going to give you an association, and you're going to perform this following method on it that I put called in source and call dot followed. So the logic that runs through this is you get my follows associations, right? And on that followed associations, I have individual follow objects. And I'm going to call my source method followed on it. So I'm basically going to grab all the users that have the key that's in followed ID. And that should return me an array of users. So if I exit, reload this, user.first, if you remember, follows doesn't have anything. So followed users also has nothing. But if we go to the second user, user.second, and get all its follows, we have a single follow. And if we want to get all the users that this person follows, we get this array. It's nasty looking, so since there's only one, I'm just going to use that first. I mean, that array dot first, and it gets me back our original user. Any questions on that? All right. Now I'm going to we created all this backend for it, right? Now I want to integrate a front end for all this backend logic into our app. So I'm going to go to my show.html page. So on every user, we could basically see all the people who this user follows. And I'll just do something like put an h3 tag, who I follow, and have access to the user. I create a convenience method that accesses all the follow users. I'm going to call that each do you and create a header for it. And a link to that user's name, user.name. And it's going to lead to the user path of that user. Save this HTML. Refresh this, and hopefully nothing breaks. So right now, it seems like this Gary guy isn't following anybody. But Howard's following Gary now. And I could just click through Gary and get back to this guy. So yeah, it's pretty cool, I would say. But now we have a way to represent follows on the back. We showed what the follows are on the back end. But what if we want to create follows? Because like all the rest of your users don't have access to your console, right? They have to do it through the front end. So first, I'm going to just define controller methods that allow you to, or just endpoints for you to create a follow and delete a follow. So first, I'm going to go to my follow. I don't have a follow controller. So I'm going to do that really quickly. Rails generate migration. Oh no, Rails generate controller follows. And I think I could just pass it methods like this. But I'm just going to manually define it. So this generator created me a follows controller. Follows controller. And I'm going to define a create endpoint and destroy endpoint. So in my create endpoint, I'm just going to start making assumptions about what information I'm going to get and just run on those assumptions, knowing that I could pass in all the information I need later. So I'm going to assume that there's a user ID that's going to be passed. Like you have a current user, and you're also getting a user of the ID of the user that you are trying to follow. So the person that's being followed equals user.find, and I'm assuming that I'm going to pass in the params that ID, and I'm going to say let's scope it under user ID. I haven't defined like the logic to do that yet, but let's just assume that existed. The follower is me, or in other words, current user, which is given to us by devise. And I could just do follow.create, where the follower, I want to pass it the follower and the followed. Do you guys understand what the hash logic is? In case you guys didn't know from earlier, that new and create take hashes takes a hash as an argument. So I'm saying that I could set the follower key on my follow object to my local variable follower and do the same for followed, in case that wasn't clear from before. And last thing I want to do is I don't have a view for create and I don't want to make one. So I'm just going to redirect this guy to the user path of the person being followed, because I'm assuming that I was originally on that person's page. Okay. Now I'm going to make some destroy logic. Let's say I get same information where I have at user equals how about, sorry, I have a different set of information. So usually when you destroy something, you destroy a resource that already exists. So that item already has an ID, so we just have to pass it that ID. So I'm just going to say follow, or I'm going to store follow equals follow.find params ID. I'm assuming that I'll pass my params hash on my delete request ID. I'm going to call follow.delete. That's basically saying delete that row from our database. And finally, I'm just going to redirect back to the person that was being followed, and I could access that guy through my followed method. Okay. So this is my controller logic on the follows end. Now I want to make some logic on my user controller. So basically when I show a user, right, I want to figure out whether I followed this person already or not. If I did follow them already, I show you an unfollowed button, but if I didn't, I'll show you a follow button. So I'm going to find an instance variable to make it very convenient for my view to access this information. I'm going to say @follow equals follow dot where the person being followed is @user and the follower is the current user or you. Dot first. So have you guys seen where before by any chance or no? I'm getting some nods. So in case some of you guys don't remember, where is just basically making a query for anything that matches a hash of parameters that I pass. So basically, give me all the follows where the person being followed is whatever stored in @user, and the follower is myself, aka the current user. And this could return us multiple instances of a model. So just calling .first just gets us the first one. And now I could go to my view logic. So if I go to show.html.erb, this is for a user. Define somewhere up here, something like if @follow. And that's basically me saying, if my query, my .where clause, basically found a follow that matched myself being the follower and the person I'm looking at being the person that's followed, this is going to return true. I'm going to run this logic. If followed, let's create a link to, call it unfollow. So that's just basically the text I'll show up. And I pass it the follow path @follow. Method delete. Run some other logic. Else or else if, ELSIF is the else if in Ruby, in case you guys haven't seen that before. Else if the current user is not equal to @user. So basically, if you're not looking at, so in the case we don't find a follow between these two people, and you're not looking at your own profile, this is the logic that's happening in the else if. I want to create a link to follow somebody and call it the follows path. And do you remember in my controller logic, I kind of assumed that in my parameters, I'm going to have a user underscore ID in the params hash. This is where I'm going to pass it. I'm going to say follows path. I'm going to pass it this parameter right here and say that will be the user I'm looking at, ID. And I'll make this method post method. Last but not least, I think I need to update my routes. I'm gonna make resources for follows. And the only thing I want is create and destroy. Okay, so I'm going to first sign in. Hope I made an account under this. Nope. Okay, I'm gonna sign up under this account. Say hi, password, blah, blah, blah. So now I could basically go to Gary, and now I have this follow button. I hit follow, and now I'm following Gary. And if we could just check that out in our database, Rails, or follow.last, and follow.last.follower.name, that's hi, which is just the person I created who followed Gary. And just to check if destroying it works, I could click unfollow, goes back here. And now if I do follow, well, here's something better, just follow.count. And I should only have one follow, and that was from the early example. The one I just created for Gary got deleted. Yeah, what's up?
Why do you need adopters in the users controller?
In the users controller? Okay, so doing a where clause is doing a query, and that query could return multiple instances. I can make multiple inserts because I didn't put any validations, right? Uniqueness validations on a follow, that I could actually insert multiple follows that match up with these parameters, right? So the return type of a .where function is going to be an array. And I just want to get the first element.
If you have validation, though, there would only be one follow object where the
Yeah, if I made a validation where like uniqueness is true on something, right? Then I wouldn't have to worry about that. But still, where's return type would be an array, and I'd just rather not have it be an array and just be an actual object or a nil. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, so even with the validation, in the end, it's still actually, yeah, when I think about it, it's still going to be an array itself. It's just either a 0 size array or a 1 size array. And that's all the validation will enforce. And just for the record, if you make a Ruby app that's like super large scale and you have you don't want validations just on the model, you could actually like put validations on the database columns itself. And when you get really large and like multiple requests are coming in, if you don't put on the database level, you might have one thing that like is invalid. So it's something you guys should watch out for in case you build like really like, you know, Twitter, Hulu size Rails applications. So yeah, okay. One last thing that I just want to go over to make this very Rails, so Quitter is basically a cop-off of Twitter, right? And what I want, the last thing that this thing needs to have like some of the main functionalities is basically having a feed, just like a list of the posts from all the people that you follow. So what I'm gonna do is just do that logic. I'm going to go to my user.rb, my user object, and define one more convenience method. I'm gonna do one more mapping. I'm gonna skip all the users I followed users, and I'm gonna do followed users quits. So basically, I'm now gonna get an array of quits of all my followed users. So my through method should the followed users, get the users that I followed, and its source should be its quits method. And don't worry about, so if you think about it, that if I have an array of users and I call quits on it, I'm going to basically get an array of arrays because quits is multiple objects, right? What Rails conveniently provides for you is that it flattens all of it for you because it knows it all should be about the same type. So even though it's nested one level deep, they're just going to make it, they're going to put everything at the same level at the top. So that's really convenient. And next, I'm going to do a follow to my follow controller. I'm going to create an index, right? Find index, which is really convenient for me. And say that I'm going to assume I will have an @follows variable dot each. I'll do on it follow. Get my for loop in there and say this, we have an h4 tag. And it's going to be this interpolated string. So I'm going to say the follow.text was posted by follow.user, which basically acts as a user, .name. Oh wait, no, this should be in the view. I totally screwed this up. Okay, I'm gonna copy that over to a view that I never created. So since I didn't generate an index view, I'm going to do one now. Go to my views folder. I make one for the follows, and I do new index dot, I think the .slim files. Is it .html.slim? So I'm going to make a new file, follows index.html.slim. And that's not what I copied. Copy and paste that over. Now I have an index view. So what I need to do is define, I need to define what @follows is. So I'm going to go to my index. I'm going to check to see if current user, basically if I'm signed in, because if I'm not signed in, I'm following nobody, right? So I could just say if current user @follows equals current user dot followed users dot quits. And that should be an else. Else, let's say I'm, not signed in. I'll just go to our default list of users. So I'm going to redirect to, and since Ruby gave me a convenient way to get to the index of all the users through users path, I'm just going to use that. Bam. I messed up right here. This should be the relationship. And yeah, so last thing, I want to make this my home. So I want to change the root to follows index. And hopefully nothing shows up. That's not what's supposed to happen. I want to show some next level debugging. Hold on, users that name, sure. Oh, wait. That makes sense. Puts follows. I'll refresh this page. Puts @follows. I mean, if you guys know what's wrong off the top of your head, let me know. Because I actually have no clue what's going wrong right now. It's starting to get requests and it's not printing anything. So I'm just going to put a debugger here. My debugger, see current user find follow users quits users. Oh, let's see. Followed users. Oh, I know what's wrong. I'm following nobody. Duh. So I'm gonna change that really quick then. Just to make this easier on myself. I totally forgot I deleted the follow on the Gary guy before I did this. So yeah, everything's going as planned, theoretically. I should not be seeing anything. But I'm just gonna, for convenience sake, I'm gonna just switch this back to users. Oh, I still have a debugger there. Pull my Rails server. So when you use the debugger, your Rails server just stops and it's not gonna respond to anything. And so I have to restart it. I click Gary, now follow Gary. Now when I go to home, now when I go to home, bam, I get a list of all the quits Gary has posted. So yeah, that's it. Quitter's complete. It pretty much works exactly like Twitter. It may be even better. Who knows? I guess the last cool thing I just want to cover really quickly is pushing this to Heroku. So let's say you're done with your app, right? And you're like, okay, it's time to prototype. I want to get people online. I could just Google Heroku Rails 4, and it gives me this pretty easy set of instructions that I'm just waiting to load, but I'll just do some of the work that I'm gonna have to do anyways. So one thing about Heroku that you guys should all know is that on development, most of you have been using SQLite 3 for your database. What Heroku wants you to do is put in the PG gem, and PG stands for Postgres. So like, we don't make you guys use Postgres because sometimes a lot of people have trouble installing it and we just didn't want to deal with that. And for the purpose of this class, it's the kind of queries you make, SQLite, you won't have any problem switching in between. So you could just basically go to your gem file, switch to SQLite 3 right before you push up. There's another set of instructions. I'll just skip through the unimportant ones. You need this gem Rails 12 factor. So I'm just going to copy it in here. And just an explanation, it's just a gem that gives you dependencies Heroku needs to run. And what group production is that it's basically saying, we're not going to install this app in development mode, aka on my computer, but when I go into production, aka like push it on Heroku or push it on Amazon, it's going to install this gem. So you could actually scope a lot of your gems for only development versus only production, because like the debugger, you don't need it in production. Stuff like annotate, you don't need that in production. You just need it for your developing purposes. And that's why they have groups. So I just put in those two things in my gem file. I am going to kill the server. I'm going to run bundle install on it. Ooh, I'm going to kill all these too. And next thing, the first command that's important that they give you is Heroku create. Heroku create. And it created this really long URL called Whispering Wildwood 6026. And basically what it said is, on Heroku server, they've created this URL for me, Whispering Wildwood 6026, and it's mine right now. There's just nothing on it. Pretend like in Heroku's little physical space of servers, they reserved you this, you basically just create this little box and it's running some processes on it. Or it's not running any right now, but they just gave you a little space on their servers. I can just do git push. Oh, there was one thing I almost forgot too. Important thing when you're switching databases is that in your config, you have a database.yml. YML. And you have to set it, when you switch from SQLite 3 to Postgres, you have to configure your Postgres through this. And I'm just letting you guys know when you push it up, and in case you run into anything, check for stuff like this. So I just go into my configs, database.yml. This is settings I don't need. Just copy the settings they gave me. Don't need to think about it much. Heroku runs on top of Git, so make sure you commit everything that you want to get pushed up. And just find the command git push Heroku master. And hopefully nothing breaks. This takes a while. Heroku isn't known for being fast. It's known just for, hey, it's easy to set up really fast, and that's it. Well, I mean, if you just don't, I'm just gonna skip waiting for that. I'm gonna tell you what happens right now. I already did this before. If you wanna look at all the lecture code, if you look on a Rails decal repository, I made it. And whatever code's in there, it's pushed up to whispering dash Everglades 5241. So I just have to put that .herokuapp.com. And yeah. So one thing about Heroku too is when you don't use your app for a while, they get really lazy and they're like, oh, we're gonna save electricity on this guy, so we're gonna turn off the process. So when you restart your app, you have to wait for it to, it takes a while, but bam. So if you guys, you could actually sign up for this site right now. So let's say I sign up, like, I'll just actually just put my email, name Howard, password, and I just want one of you to sign up to prove that it actually works. Or at least you could hopefully see me. Come on, anybody? Whispering Everglades 5241. Oh, snap. Thank you, Hubert, Claire, and the Gon. So, I don't know, wait, Claire, can you, I'm gonna follow you. And can you post a quit? Oh, snap, yo. It's magic. But now that this is basically from 3 weeks ago, just spending a little bit of time of just coding and explaining along the way, we've started from absolutely nothing to creating an app that's pretty much Twitter or even better. So, and the cool thing about Heroku is that you can also just look at how your app's performing. Let's see. I'm just gonna go to Heroku.com. They usually give a dash. board. It's whispering at 5241. Activity. Oh, that's my own activity. Metrics. Oh, I think you might have to pay for this. Never mind then. All right. That's lecture for today, guys. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys to death, and it was kind of interesting getting from Rails new app to an app that's online with hyper growth. Time to get an investment from a VC now. But yeah, thank you. If you want to basically skip on emailing any of your TAs and just meet them after class, we're here.